Good afternoon and welcome to one of our accounts exec how-to series. We're going to have a quick look at how to set up supplier accounts and process supplier invoices and process payments. We're going to keep this quick so that you get a quick look at how this actually works. So I've got accounts exec open here, and as usual I navigate to the area I want to, which in this case is purchases. I have this open, and underneath you'll see a series of tabs, one of which is suppliers, which is the one I've got selected. If I wanted to look at supplier transactions, of course I would click supplier transactions over here, and the other tags, so the order invoicing, is to do with purchase orders, but we won't be looking at that today. So in the grid here we can see the supplier accounts. These are the suppliers on the system, and then down the bottom we have a series of action buttons as normal. If I click the add button in the suppliers tab, so we're in the suppliers tab here, I click add and it creates a new account for me, or it gives me a pro forma. So I'm going to put in my usual favorite, test supplier. I'm going to give it an automatic account number. This button here creates an automatic number. You don't have to do that. That is purely if you want to. You can override that manually with any sequence you so choose. The only requirement is if you set one, the account numbers have to be unique, but you do not have to do so. I'm going to put in the supplier's VAT number, not obviously a real one, and I can set the credit limit for the supplier. You can set all or some of these settings. I can select the payment terms for it. These will set the automatic points for the invoices when you put them on the system. And I'll select a currency. We'll have this as a sterling account. Okay. The override VAT means that the supplier is operating as a supplier where the VAT status of the supplier here controls what the VAT settings are for the invoices, the automatic VAT settings. Okay, we can put in a street, so a street, a location, the town, and E293BR. Okay, now I don't need to complete any of the other details, but I'm going to put in a phone number, and over here, this is contact information. Now, I'm going to put myself in here for a moment. And we're going to click Save. Now that supplier is in the system. If I exited that, if I looked for the account test, there is the test supplier I've just created. Okay, other things to note, you can complete as much or as little of this information as you want. So, and save that, and that's on the contact. This information over here relates to the contacts that are attached to the supplier. By default, the system will create a default contact, but you can add as many other contacts from your database as you wish. So if I pick up this particular contact, I now have two contacts assigned, one of which is marked as the default. You can change that by right-clicking, set as default, and then when I go back to the main screen, it's, in this case, Karen's details that show up on this area. If I go back to contacts and mark it as myself as the default, then now my details show up on here. Any changes I make in here, so I can make this a secondary work number and save that. If I go back to the contacts, that information is in the contact information here. Contacts are a record of a person, and they can be stored and used on any number of suppliers and any number of customers at the same time. If you're wondering what these little dial buttons are, these are the phone integration system that comes with which can be connected to this system, whereby you can click the button and it will dial out. So I click that and it'll say dial. I'm just going to say no because that's not actually running at this point. Okay, that's all there is to creating the basic information for a supplier. In fact, all you actually need to put in is a name. So if I was to come out, click Add, and say, and save that, I've created a supplier called A Supplier. There it is, ready to go. So it is as quick as that. If you wish it to, you can fill in as much or as little as you need to. I'm going to go back to my test. Over here is the bank information. Now, you can't actually edit this on this screen. This is for very specific security reasons. It means that the bank information can be secured from editing by somebody at a different level from the supplier-based information. If I click this, and I'll leave the IBAN empty, and you can see that information has filled in. Okay. If I go come out of this now, so that we have a test account running. That's all there is to setting up suppliers. You'll notice that I'm filtering this screen. This is basic filtering on Accounts Exec. It applies on every display. Just to reiterate, these are our main area buttons for navigating. If I want to look at sales or purchases, I simply click the main area button. I've got the tab selected that I want, in this case suppliers, and these controls here allow us to filter. They auto-respond simply by typing in, or you can hit enter at any time you want, and it will filter according to that. The characters that you put in apply to the account code and to the supplier name. Obviously, you could filter on contact if you wanted to, or the email address or the phone number. Excuse me. So with the supplier account, if I was, for example, to bring up the test account here, I could find that same supplier by typing in 2123, which is the number of the account. So I've got my account file, I've got my found my supplier. I actually want to add an invoice. Now you can add an invoice from this display or the transactions display. So I'm going to add one from here. I'm going to right click, or I could click the add invoice button, having selected the supplier I want on the grid. I'm going to right click, add invoice, and the invoice entry screen arrives. Now this screen is designed specifically to work with your keyboard or your mouse if you prefer, but a keyboard is quicker and easier. So if this invoice was, for example, dated the 11th of March, navigating around these fields, I'm using my left and right arrows to do this. All date fields are the same. I'm going to type in a reference number. I can set the VAT code that I want to apply. I'm scrolling up and down with my arrow keys again, but again, I could use the mouse if I wanted to and do that. And then I'm going to put in the gross amount of the invoice. The VAT will be automatically calculated, but I can override that if I need to. Sometimes you get penny differences on VAT. If I hit enter, the system will then say, well, what account code do you want to code that to? So I'm going to code that to cost of sales. And I end up with an invoice with a single analysis line on it. If I just hit enter, that will post it. If I open my supplier account now, it will automatically drop to the transactions page because there's an open transaction there, and there is our invoice. Likewise, if I go to my transactions display, I could type in test, in which case you will see the test ref transaction there. Or if I take that out and go test ref here, I can find the invoice by simply typing the reference in from the transactions display. Okay. Now, the other thing that we're going to cover here is putting a payment against this. So the most common thing you're going to do is put an invoice in, which is what I've just done. There are other ways of putting invoices in. We could open the supplier up here, and we could add an invoice from this screen and do exactly the same. Alternatively, we could go to the transactions display and click add invoice from here, only this time it will now ask us who's the supplier, because on this occasion we're not focusing on the supplier account, but it is nonetheless exactly the same process. So I'm going to put an invoice into this display and test ref 2. I'm going to call this one £160 gross. There's the VAT. And this time I'm going to analyze it split. So I'm going to change the amount that I'm analyzing, and I'm going to give it 2,000 to cost of sales. Now, this invoice is at a balance at this point in time. So if I tried to post it, it will automatically rebalance itself. And the reason it does that is it says, okay, you've left one line in, obviously that's the one you want me to balance it to. I'm going to change the balance on that line, change it back to 50, And now I'm going to add a line. And this time I'm going to post this to, let's say, I don't know, insurances. Fill in the amount I want to fill in, and then we have a balanced invoice. Save and exit, and it's posted. So this time we've got an invoice with more than one line on it, more than one analysis, and you can put as many on as you wish, and you can keep on going. Okay, so let's talk about how we pay that. So we can do that in a couple of ways. We can add a payment to the supplier, like this. From this screen, we could click the Add Payment button, which does the same thing. Or we could go to the suppliers listing and add a payment from here. Well, my personal favorite is to go into the transactions display, right-click on the invoice I'm going to pay. It will pick up the amount automatically, and then it's allocated and cleared. Now you'll notice it's disappeared from this display. That is because the transaction has now got a cleared balance, it's allocated. So by right-click and view allocations, we can actually see that offset against itself. Any point you choose, I'm going to actually just go back into allocate transactions. Go back into the view allocations. I'm going to delete that allocation now, just to demonstrate this point. And I could bring up the allocation screen anytime I choose. And I can allocate invoices to any partial allocation. You can see the 120 has been picked up, or more logically in this case, the one we actually did pay. And we can allocate it like that. If you process invoices in a batch, then you will get payment batches that will do all the allocation and so forth for you. I'm going to cover payment batches in another webinar. So I hope that gives you a quick introduction into how to create supplier accounts, to process invoices, and to process payments against those invoices. Thanks very much for listening.